To know this has been going on, to interview the father of weather weapons before he died, Dr. Ben Livingston, who they were controlling hurricanes in the 60s, certified secret government documents that had been declassified. That's why I had him on.
I'm the first person to ever see a cloud with the intention to cause it to do military damage.
The Army's need to know more and more about weather that surrounds this planet is a vital part of the expanded research program of atomic weapons. We all talk about the weather. The Army is doing something about the weather.
We physicists are firing trillion-watt lasers into the sky to actually precipitate rain clouds and actually bring down lightning bolts. Even in the 60s, the CIA used this to bring down monsoons during the Vietnam War.
But there weren't any real clouds around. This was the end of the monsoon season, but there were a number of these small clouds that barely reached the freezing level, and by putting a small amount of silver iodide in there, we got them to collect and start to build. My main contribution at Corona was to write a plan for weather modification control for the whole world at any given time. We could send a number of airplanes with the materials and dispensing equipment we had, and probably control the weather all the way around the world. We were the first ones to fly into hurricanes for the purpose of modifying them, if you will. That was Project Storm Fury. I began to be extremely confident that we could do about what we wanted to with a hurricane. The Project Storm Fury had been going on since 1961, and they had already done 2 experiments, one in 61 and 63. Well, by 1964, when I was there in 1964, I wrote the plan and started to have a track and a mission for every flight that was on the hurricane cloud seeding experiments. So we had documentation for everything.
The climate engineering transmissions are 10 times more powerful than the frequency transmissions for communications. So all of this is a part of the problem, and manipulating wind flows as well. And that's key. We see it happening right now with the severe weather outbreaks happening in the U.S. as manipulated flows of moisture are being migrated in from the western U.S., chemically nucleated, creates a cold, dense layer of air on the surface. As they push that eastward and it collides with manipulated moisture from the record warm Gulf, and those two air masses collide, you get severe weather, which creates unstable atmospheric conditions, which creates cyclonic rotations. The cyclonic rotations that are being spawned right now are from conditions that are directly connected to climate engineering. That doesn't mean a specific cyclone in a specific location, but it means the overall region that has been set up for a spawning ground for tornadoes, and that's inarguable. We can argue the motives and the agendas, but the fact that climate engineering is manipulating conditions that are spawning these conditions is inarguable.
Fourth generation farmer, and they are finding in the land that we've had for so long in a 100-year-old farm, things that they have no idea or reason why things should be in the soil. I'm talking bacteria, I'm talking different acids, pH levels, but it's all come from what falls out of the air.
1998, which was the warmest year ever recorded up to that point in time. That's when they coined the term climate change instead of global warming, because they knew they'd be causing these flash chemical cool downs. The vapor pressure deficit is the respiratory pores on crops, trees. They shut when conditions are as we've just described. So they don't uptake carbon, they don't release oxygen. We don't have anybody in the environmental community discussing this and the effect from climate engineering. So again, hypocrisy from the environmentalist community, leaving out all these pieces of the puzzle.
Ben, why hasn't there been a lawsuit against the government for not stopping these hurricanes?
You know, I don't know. I'm not a lawyer, but I really don't understand why, because the government certainly has reneged on its responsibility to the citizens of the country to protect them.
There's no hiding from this issue. I want to state that. You cannot put this issue in the rearview mirror like you can so many other issues, and people choose to ignore it if they can. Can't ignore this. This is pounding the nails into our collective coffins by the day.
The term chemtrails comes fairly loaded because there's an assumption when you use the term chemtrails that there's something harmful happening as a result. And that's why it's become the colloquial go-to term. And in fact, those who have been watching this and have dedicated their lives to tracking geoengineering, they are comfortable using the term chemtrail now because they have identified particles, materials, inputs that are being used for geoengineering and weather modification through aerosol injection that actually are harmful to human health and our ecosystem health as well. So natural systems such as soil, water, and air are being impacted negatively. And I do know that HHS is in the process of putting together a team to investigate this. Much is unknown. Some is known. We do know that cloud seeding does exist. We do know that counties throughout the United States have active contracts with private companies to cloud seed and thus bring greater moisture to arid lands. And this is all done under the umbrella of climate change mitigation. And so what we don't know and what HHS wants to figure out is the full spectrum of these activities and whether there is a fundamental missing regulatory body looking into harmful impacts of these practices. We need to be spending efforts at the executive level is really investigating what the federal government is doing without these disclosures. So, at the state level, so, there's this misconception that if you ban geoengineering at the state level, you protect all the skies above that state from these practices. That's false. Even if you ban geoengineering at the state level, such as what Tennessee has done, the federal government can still operate these projects overhead. There is no referendum process or even required disclosure process, and that is wrong. That is not okay. And while this hasn't been fully or thoroughly examined legally, there's no lawsuits yet, but there should be. So states that have banned these practices have every right to sue the federal government for these practices. We just haven't had a state level attorney general yet bring one of these cases forward. And if you are an AG of one of these states, I highly recommend that we push for one of these lawsuits, because I don't know how else we're going to get these disclosures. And in fact, there is quite a bit of active censorship or media manipulation that really deters individuals from furthering their inquiries and curiosity as to what's actually at play. And, I think that playbook of really using these derogatory attacks on qualified inquiries to shut them up. I mean, that reminds us all of what it felt like during those COVID lockdowns. And so there's a lot of parallels to be drawn between the COVID-19 era and what's happening today, which is this Overton window being blown wide open on the issue of geoengineering, people coming forward with evidence that is raising concern, real red flags about the contents of what is being used for weather modification, the lack of regulatory oversight, the lack of disclosure to the public, the lack of public consent. And here we are. Here we are at what I think is the beginning of this global conversation around geoengineering and fact finding, and going up against, we don't really know what right now. Is this, so interestingly, there is a disclosure requirement if a geoengineering company is going to be modifying the weather. They're actually required by law to notify NOAA of that, so that NOAA can update its weather forecasts. So the fact that they're saying such, contradictory things like, well, don't, there's things that can be done, but there's but you guys are adding too much hyperbole to this, too much sensationalism. Like, you don't, waste your time discussing the sensationalism of weather modification. Go on with your day. There's nothing to be concerned with here.
Right.
Well, they don't actually have enough knowledge to understand the totality of what these projects do to our ecosystem and atmospheric processes. And, for them to just brush this off as no big deal, when in fact we know that, the laws of thermodynamics and the unpredictability of our atmosphere can lead to serious consequences. And there have been scientists that have been blowing the whistle on this, raising concerns about the fact that when you meddle with atmospheric systems, there are unintended consequences that we don't fully understand how to model yet and predict. And given the fact that not all of these are disclosed and looked at under, one system model is problematic as well. So I think, in total, NOAA really ought to be empowering dissenting voices. And again, this is what happened during COVID-19. We censored dissenting voices that were qualified, including the voice of Jay Bhattacharya, who is now head of NIH, an epidemiologist from Stanford University, who was silenced because he looked at the data and said, lockdowns are not being handled properly. There's a better way to do this. And he was, silenced. And so there's many people today in the context of geoengineering and weather modification that are also being silenced. These are very important voices, and NOAA ought to be listening to them. I do know that HHS will be listening to them. I mean, for instance, the CDC is refusing to give access to HHS to very important databases. And those databases do contain information about, for instance, what are in some of these lot numbers that were injected into American citizens, because we know that there was inconsistency in the vaccine manufacturing process of the mRNA vaccines. And, we would like to know which lot numbers were compromised. So this is something that I feel like the public deserves access to. This is really important information for individuals to be able to investigate what is going on with their own health. And there's roadblocks. And so there's these various layers of bureaucracy that prevent these very common sense agenda items to get through. And, fluoride, a very important study just came out that showed conclusively that a certain amount of exposure to fluoride in the water causes neurodevelopmental issues, decreased IQ. And it's a very good study. It's a solid study. But why can't that study affect immediate change? Also, why can't the studies on the problems with the mRNA vaccine affect enough change for the FDA to withdraw its approval? Well, there's a lot of legacy roadblocks in the federal government right now within these agencies, and it is going to take a massive effort to unlock those roadblocks. There's individuals within these agencies that are actively trying to undermine these efforts. And so this has been a multi-decade battle, and here we are now on the front lines, close to getting it done, and we still hear these same embedded interests, and it doesn't really make sense, I mean, to anybody besides, it truly does the dental industry, are they all fighting for this? I mean, certainly my dentist isn't fighting to keep fluoride in the water. They see and hear all these things. Like, tweet at Stephen Miller. He has a huge amount of authority in the administration. And so don't give up We're close. We just got a new head of the FDA today. We just got a new head of NIH today. And all of these cabinet positions are critical to getting things done, because it's not just, Bobby alone can't do it. It has to be the other members of the cabinet as well. And then it getting through to their entire agencies. I mean, these are agencies full of individuals, and they are looking at and reading what we are putting out there on social media. So, this is something we cannot lose faith. We have to keep pushing.